Thank you, Vijay. I'm really honored and happy to be here with you. This is a very, very important presentation that, that we're doing today. So without further ado, I would actually like to share my screen, and I'll just jump right into the content. So the key point, and um, I don't really have to belabor this, but the US is escalating to war. And currently there is an epidemic of attacks against Asians. These attacks are inseparable from the racist attacks on China. That is to say, wholesale policy hate mongering trickles down into retail violence, and Asians are collateral damage. If you're prepared to attack Asians over there, you will get attacks on Asians over here. Xenophobia kills. Now, people will say, isn't Trump the cause? But these attacks are happening outside Trump's sphere of influence. They happened before Trump, and they continue to spike after Trump has been silenced. This is a little graphic from the New York Times. You can see after Trump had his social media taken away from him, there was an even greater spike in attacks. Biden and Eli Ratner said Trump was too weak on China. Blinken said China is committing genocide. The policy precedes Trump. So where does this come from? Of course, we know the history. When the first contacts with China happened, there was a great shock to Western white supremacy. And therefore, there was a quick pivot that the Chinese were immoral, they were despots, they were completely a threat to the West. So Horace Greeley said Chinese are uncivilized, unclean, filthy beyond all conception. And he was a progressive. So we see that in history, the mass lynchings, the greatest lynchings in American history were actually of the Chinese. And of course, entire American fortunes, the great fortunes, were built on the exploitation and the violation of the Chinese through narco trafficking. So in a country developed on settler colonialism, this anti-Asian hatred is one of the most enduring prejudices in the West. And so we see that Trump has tapped into these old stereotypes, these race war stereotypes. Chinese are dirty, dishonest, depraved, despotic, and dangerous. They're responsible for COVID. So again, we have to understand this in the larger context of this escalation to war. Of course, we all know about the Naira testimony, but we have to understand essentially that when we are being told absurdities, they are to prepare you for atrocities. The US is actually already engaged in hybrid warfare, multi-domain hybrid warfare, economic warfare, tech warfare, legal warfare, diplomatic warfare, military brinksmanship, civil subversion, and academic warfare. And we're seeing total information warfare. Once again, those who tell you absurdities are preparing you for atrocities. So we can understand also the geopolitics of this. As the Soviet Union fell, there was no longer any political need to engage with China, but there was also the understanding that China could become a challenger to the United States. This is Andrew Marshall. He was considered Yoda. He was the top advisor to 12 secretaries of defense. And he essentially mentored an entire generation of people that we now recognize as neocons. This is one of these neocons. In 1992, Wolfowitz wrote up something called the Defense Planning Guidance Document, which was a plan for global US hegemony. This was so embarrassing they had to disavow it when it was leaked. but it became the project for a new American century. And then this became the Bush Doctrine, which became the Obama Doctrine. And then as part of the Obama Doctrine, we had the pivot to Asia, which was essentially a plan to encircle and contain China. Along with the pivot to Asia, less known is that there was an actual plan for war. This is Andrew Krepinovich, who kind of worked out the nuts and bolts of war with China. At the same time, there was two groups, blue team, red team. They had sharp axes to grind on China from the Cold War. And once again, you see the blue team members, Michael Ledeen, Robert Kagan, John Bolton, a rogues gallery of extreme hawks. These people essentially stated that there was no hope of coexistence with China. They also subscribed to this understanding that China, if it were to build relations with other countries, that it would become the pacing threat to the United States. This is a topological map. China has more connections to any other country in the world. It's also, all of this can be connected through overland routes. The US has to fracture this connection along the quote unquote, the world island, that is the Eurasian continent. If it fails to do that, then the United States will lose its power and the world island, Eurasia, will become the pivot state, and it will essentially shift the global gravity of power. So this is why we have the encirclement of China. This is air-sea battle. This is the plan to encircle China and shut down its trade routes. China's response is to build the Belt and Road, and you can see the overland routes that go through Myanmar and through Pakistan and then all the way through Europe. The US in response is escalating. It has something that it calls the third offset, which is its plan to attack China through swarming, automated warfare, subsurface warfare, guided missiles, building a wall of missiles around China using cyber warfare. And of course, this also ties into the fact that China is a threat to the US-led system of capitalism. China's socialism with Chinese characteristics works, and it outclasses the West. The US has originally expected China to collapse like the Soviet Union or to assimilate as a junior partner in this global US-led neoliberal system. Of course, that didn't happen, especially in 2008, when it became clear that the US-led neoliberal system had collapsed around its own ears. That's when the daggers came out. So the US ruling classes are desperate to erase China and its example. It offers a threatening alternative model of development that is non-capitalist, non-Western, and non-colonial. And also it undermines the West's neo-colonial domination of the third world and its debt-trapped based forced underdevelopment, subservience, and expropriation. So the ruling classes will go to, in the West, will go to war to prevent this. This is what we're facing right now. The greatest threat to the US is not China, but the US itself, 13% poverty, etc. And also by politicizing the virus, we fail to understand the seriousness of the threat, and we fail to copy China's effective non-pharmaceutical measures. So we are in a moment of total deceit. Our work is cut out for us. We have to prevent the war, but more than that, we have to prevent the first casualty, which is truth. I want to invite everybody to organize, act. Despair is not an option. Thank you.